In the heart of Compton, California, long before Eric Wright became known to the world as Eazy-E, he was just another kid trying to survive in one of the most notorious neighborhoods in America. Born on September 7, 1964, Eric grew up in a city where gang violence, poverty, and police brutality were the norm. The streets of Compton weren't kind to many, and young Eric knew that he had to find a way out of the life that seemed to trap everyone around him. He wasn't a stranger to hardship. He saw it everywhere, from friends getting caught up in gang life to family members struggling to make ends meet. Eazy-E's upbringing in Compton was defined by the economic struggles that plagued his neighborhood. The 1980s saw the rise of crack cocaine, and Compton was one of the cities hit hardest by this epidemic. Opportunities for young people were slim, and for many the drug trade was the only real chance at making money. Eric Wright, like many other young men in his community, turned to the streets at an early age. He dropped out of high school in the 10th grade and started hustling, selling drugs to support himself and his family. It wasn't long before Eric earned a reputation on the streets. He wasn't the tallest or the toughest guy around, but he was smart and had a business mind. His ability to navigate the dangerous world of street dealing made him stand out. He wasn't just thinking about quick cash, he was thinking about building something bigger. However, deep down, Eric knew that the drug game was a dead end. He had seen too many of his friends and acquaintances either end up in jail or dead. The streets were a dangerous place, and it was clear to Eric that if he didn't find a way out, he could easily meet the same fate. Despite his involvement in the drug trade, Eric had a deep love for music. Growing up, he was heavily influenced by the sounds of funk, soul, and early hip-hop. Acts like Run DMC and Grandmaster Flash inspired him, and he realized that music could be a way out of the dangerous life he was living. But Eric wasn't a rapper, at least not yet. He didn't have the same passion for performing as some of his peers, but he saw potential in the hip-hop scene that was beginning to take shape in Los Angeles. He was always looking for a way to make money, and music seemed like a much safer and more legitimate business than selling drugs. With a head for business and a foot still firmly in the streets, Eric began thinking about how he could transition from hustling drugs to hustling records. He didn't want to be a rapper himself, but he saw a future in producing and managing other artists. Music was more than just a hobby for him, it was an escape, a way to leave the streets behind and make something of himself. He had a vision of owning his own record label, and he was determined to make it happen. As Eric began to seriously consider the music industry as his next venture, he connected with a few local rappers and DJs in the Compton area. He saw potential in the gritty, raw stories they told through their lyrics. They rapped about the same streets that Eric had grown up on, and he knew that this type of authenticity was missing from mainstream hip-hop at the time. Eric didn't have much experience in the music business, but he had an entrepreneurial mindset, and he was ready to take a risk. His first big break came when he met Jerry Heller, a music manager with experience in the industry. Heller saw something special in Eric, even though he wasn't a typical music executive. Eric had a streetwise approach to business and a vision for the kind of music he wanted to produce. Together, they founded Ruthless Records in 1987. With this move, Eric officially transformed from a street hustler into a music mogul. The foundation of Ruthless Records marked a turning point for Eric Wright. He was no longer just hustling to survive, he was building an empire. His connections in the streets helped him gain credibility, but it was his vision and drive that set him apart. As Eazy-E, he was ready to take the music world by storm, and the streets of Compton were about to become the soundtrack for a revolution in hip-hop. Little did anyone know, Eric Wright was on the verge of becoming one of the most influential figures in the genre. The streets of Compton had taught Eric Wright plenty about survival, but now it was time for him to apply that knowledge in a completely different arena, the music business. By 1987, Eric was officially going by the name Eazy-E and had teamed up with Jerry Heller to form Ruthless Records. Eazy's plan was simple: take the raw, unfiltered energy of the streets and package it into music that told the real story of life in Compton. But while Eazy's mind was set on success, there were still plenty of hurdles to overcome before he could bring his vision to life. Though Eazy-E had no formal music training, he knew what the people wanted. His instincts told him that the world was ready for a new sound, one that didn't shy away from the harsh realities of life in the inner city. He wasn't interested in polished, radio-friendly rap. He wanted to create something that reflected the gritty experiences he and his friends had grown up with. That's where N.W.A, NZ Wit attitudes came in. N.W.A. would eventually become one of the most controversial and groundbreaking groups in hip-hop, but in the beginning it was just a bunch of local rappers from Compton trying to make their mark. Eazy-E wasn't a natural rapper, but he saw potential in others around him. He had a unique ability to bring people together, and he began forming a crew that included Dr. Dre, a talented DJ and producer Ice Cube, a sharp lyricist with a knack for storytelling DJ Yella, Dre's partner in producing beats, and MC Ren, another Compton native with a distinct voice. Together, they began to experiment with sounds that would soon take the world by storm. However, things didn't come together overnight. The early days of Ruthless Records were anything but glamorous. Eazy-E, Dre, and the rest of the crew spent long nights in makeshift studios trying to craft a sound that was both innovative and authentic. They didn't have major label backing or big budgets, but what they lacked in resources they made up for in determination. For Eazy, Ruthless Records was more than just a label, it was his way out of the streets, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make it succeed. Eazy's first big test as a rapper came with the release of his debut single, Boys in the Hood, in 1987. Written by Ice Cube and produced by Dr. Dre, the track was a raw, unapologetic look at life in Compton, featuring Eazy's distinctive, high-pitched voice. Though Eazy hadn't originally planned to be a rapper himself, the song needed a voice, and he stepped up to the mic. The result was an instant underground hit that put Ruthless Records on the map. Eazy's style was unique. He wasn't trying to sound like other rappers at the time, and that worked in his favor. People were drawn to his laid-back yet menacing delivery, and Boys in the Hood became an anthem for the streets. With the success of the single, Eazy-E and his crew knew they had something special. It was clear that the public was hungry for the kind of music they were making, and Eazy wasted no time capitalizing on the momentum. In 1988, N.W.A. released their debut album, Straight Outta Compton. The album was a game changer not just for Eazy-E and Ruthless Records, but for the entire hip-hop industry. Straight Outta Compton was raw, aggressive, and unapologetic. Songs like F to Tay Police directly confronted issues like police brutality, racism, and the systemic oppression that plagued black communities across the country. Eazy's vision had come to life, and N.W.A. was quickly gaining attention, both good and bad. Their music resonated with people who had grown up in the same conditions, but it also drew criticism from law enforcement, politicians, and the media. The FBI even sent a letter to Ruthless Records condemning the group's lyrics and accusing them of inciting violence, but the controversy only fueled N.W.A.'s rise to fame. Eazy-E was at the center of it all, and for the first time he was starting to see the fruits of his labor. His transition from drug dealer to record executive was complete, and he was quickly becoming one of the most influential figures in West Coast hip-hop. Ruthless Records was now a force to be reckoned with, and N.W.A. was leading the charge. But with success came challenges. Eazy-E had built Ruthless Records from the ground up, but managing the growing egos within N.W.A. proved to be difficult. Ice Cube, who had written many of the group's most iconic lyrics, began to feel underappreciated and underpaid. Tensions between Cube and Eazy, along with Jerry Heller's increasing influence over the business side of things, led to Cube's departure from the group in 1989. The split was ugly, with Cube releasing the diss track No Baseline, which directly called out Eazy and Heller for taking advantage of the group. Despite the internal conflicts, Eazy-E continued to push forward. He wasn't just focused on N.W.A., he was also thinking about the future of Ruthless Records. Eazy had a knack for spotting talent, and he began signing other artists to the label, including Bone Thugs-n-Harmony, who would go on to become one of the biggest acts of the 1990s. Eazy was evolving from a rapper into a full-fledged music mogul, but the drama with N.W.A. was far from over. The breakup of N.W.A. marked the end of an era, but for Eazy-E, it was just the beginning of a new chapter. He had successfully turned Ruthless Records into a powerhouse in the music industry, but the challenges he faced both personally and professionally were far from over. As the 1990s approached, Eazy's life would take a series of dramatic turns that would forever cement his legacy in the world of hip-hop. By the late 1980s, N.W.A. was more than just a group of rappers from Compton, they were a cultural force. Eazy-E had managed to take his vision of unfiltered, street-level storytelling and turn it into a movement. When Straight Outta Compton dropped in 1988, it didn't just shake up the music industry, it changed the way America viewed hip-hop. For many, N.W.A. was a wake-up call, a blunt reminder that the stories of Black America's inner cities were often ignored, misunderstood, or suppressed. The album's title track, Straight Outta Compton, was a declaration. It introduced listeners to the harsh realities of life in the streets, where gang violence, police brutality, and survival at all costs were daily concerns. N.W.A wasn't trying to sugarcoat anything. They weren't making music to please the masses, they were making music that spoke to people who lived the same lives they did. Eazy-E, in his distinct voice, delivered lyrics that sounded more like a conversation than a performance, giving the tracks an authenticity that couldn't be faked. However, the most controversial song on the album, F'd Up Police, sparked a national conversation. At a time when police brutality was rampant, but often ignored by mainstream media, N.W.A had the audacity to call out law enforcement directly. The song wasn't just rebellious, it was revolutionary. Eazy-E and the rest of the group were taking aim at the very institutions that oppressed their communities. The track was so provocative that it caught the attention of the FBI, which sent a letter to Ruthless Records condemning the song's anti-police rhetoric. But rather than backing down, the controversy only helped propel the group to new heights. While the mainstream media painted N.W.A as dangerous, violent, and a bad influence on young listeners, the group's fans saw them as heroes. Eazy-E, in particular, became an icon for standing up against authority. He wasn't the most lyrical or technically skilled rapper, but his presence was undeniable. Eazy embodied the spirit of rebellion, and fans gravitated toward his unapologetic approach to life. He was the ultimate anti-hero, someone who had made it out of the streets on his own terms. Despite, or perhaps because of the controversy, Straight Outta Compton was a commercial success. It sold millions of copies and solidified N.W.A as the voice of the streets. But the album's influence went far beyond just record sales. It inspired a generation of artists to speak their truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made people. Groups like Public Enemy and artists like Ice-T followed in N.W.A.'s footsteps, using hip-hop as a tool for social commentary. N.W.A wasn't just making music, they were creating a new subgenre, gangsta rap. And while the media was quick to criticize the group's violent and explicit lyrics, Eazy-E knew that they were tapping into something bigger. For Eazy, the success of Straight Outta Compton wasn't just about making money or gaining fame, it was about giving a voice to the voiceless. He understood that people were tired of hearing the same sanitized version of reality that dominated mainstream music. What N.W.A offered was real, raw, and unfiltered. But even as N.W.A. star was rising, tensions were building behind the scenes. Ice Cube, who had written much of the group's most powerful material, was growing increasingly frustrated with his financial situation. Despite the group's success, he felt he wasn't being fairly compensated, and much of that frustration was directed at Eazy-E and Jerry Heller, who managed the business side of things. The money wasn't adding up, and Cube wasn't about to stay silent. In 1989, after months of internal conflict, Ice Cube made the decision to leave N.W.A. His departure was a major blow to the group, but for Eazy-E, it was a test of his leadership. Cube was one of the most talented lyricists in the group, but Eazy was confident that N.W.A could continue without him. Cube's exit wasn't just a business dispute, it was personal. The fallout would lead to one of the most famous diss tracks in hip-hop history, No Vaseline, in which Ice Cube brutally attacked Eazy and the rest of the group for their treatment of him. But at the time, Eazy brushed it off. He had bigger plans. Even with Cube's departure, N.W.A pushed forward. Their second album, NZ for Life, was released in 1991 and debuted at No.1 on the Billboard charts, further proving that they were still a force to be reckoned with. But the cracks were starting to show. As Eazy-E's business empire grew, so did the egos and ambitions within the group. Dr. Dre, who had been instrumental in producing N.W.A.'s signature sound, began to feel that his talents were being overshadowed by Eazy's growing reputation as a businessman. Dre was itching for more creative control, and it wasn't long before he too began to question his role within Ruthless Records. For Eazy-E, though, the focus was always on building Ruthless Records into something bigger than just N.W.A. He wasn't content with just being a rapper, he wanted to be a mogul. He had already proven that he could take street culture and turn it into a global phenomenon, but now he was thinking beyond just music. He wanted to turn Ruthless into an empire, signing new acts and expanding the label's reach. His ability to spot talent was undeniable, and he had already signed promising artists like Bone Thugs and Harmony, who would go on to become one of the biggest groups of the 1990s. But as N.W.A. continued to dominate the charts, the cracks in the foundation were getting harder to ignore. The egos, the money disputes, and the personal conflicts were taking their toll. Eazy-E had built something extraordinary, but keeping it together was becoming increasingly difficult. The rise of N.W.A. was as fast as it was explosive, and now with Ice Cube gone and Dr. Dre starting to pull away, Eazy was about to face the biggest challenges of his career. As N.W.A. continued to rise in fame, Eazy-E's ambitions began to expand beyond just being a rapper. He had already made a name for himself as the driving force behind Ruthless Records, but Eazy wasn't content to stop there. He had always seen himself as more than just an artist. He wanted to be a businessman, a mogul who could control his own destiny in an industry where so many others were being exploited. For Eazy, the music was important, but the business side was where he truly thrived. While the media often portrayed Eazy as just another gangster rapper, those close to him knew better. Behind the sunglasses and the jerry curl was a sharp mind for business. Eazy was constantly thinking about the next move, how to expand Ruthless Records, how to sign new talent, and how to stay ahead in an industry that was notorious for chewing up and spitting out artists. His partnership with Jerry Heller, while controversial, had allowed Eazy to navigate the complex world of contracts, royalties, and publishing rights. And though Heller was often criticized for his involvement with N.W.A., there was no denying that together, he and Eazy had built something powerful. But success came at a cost. By the early 1990s, the internal tensions within N.W.A. were becoming impossible to ignore. Ice Cube's departure had already rocked the group, but now Dr. Dre was starting to voice his frustrations as well. Dre was tired of the way things were being run at Ruthless Records. He felt that Jerry Heller was taking too much control, and that Eazy wasn't doing enough to ensure the rest of the group was getting paid fairly. For Dre, the music had always come first, but it was becoming increasingly clear that Eazy's focus was shifting more toward the business side of things. The tension between Dre and Eazy reached its breaking point in 1991. Dre, who had been instrumental in creating N.W.A.'s signature sound, felt that he wasn't being properly compensated for his work. On top of that, he was frustrated with the creative direction of the group. Dre wanted more control, and he was tired of dealing with the business politics that came with being part of Ruthless Records. In Dre's mind, it was time to move on. Enter Suge Knight. Suge, a former bodyguard turned music executive, had been quietly making moves in the industry, and he saw an opportunity in Dre's growing dissatisfaction. Suge approached Dre with a proposition to leave Ruthless Records and start a new label, one where Dre would have full creative control and wouldn't have to answer to Eazy or Heller. It was an offer Dre couldn't refuse. But Suge Knight wasn't known for playing by the rules. According to various reports, Suge used intimidation tactics to get Dre out of his contract with Ruthless Records. One story claims that Suge, along with a few associates, showed up at Jerry Heller's office with baseball bats, demanding that Dre be released from his contract. Whether or not the story is true, one thing was certain: Suge Knight wasn't someone to be trifled with, and Eazy-E knew it. Dre's departure from N.W.A. and Ruthless Records was a major blow to Eazy. Dre wasn't just any member of the group, he was the mastermind behind their sound, the producer who had turned Eazy's vision into reality. Losing Dre meant losing a key part of what made N.W.A. so special. But for Eazy, the split was more than just a professional setback, it was personal. He and Dre had been through a lot together, and now their relationship was in tatters. Dre wasted no time moving on. He and Suge Knight founded Death Row Records, and Dre's first solo album, The Chronic, was released in 1992. The album was an instant success, and it marked the beginning of a new era in West Coast hip-hop. But Dre didn't just move on, he made it a point to take shots at Eazy on his way out the door. In songs like F with Dre Day, Dre and his protege Snoop Dogg openly mocked Eazy, calling him out for his business practices and accusing him of being a sellout. Eazy-E wasn't one to back down from a fight. In response to Dre's disses, Eazy released his own diss track, Real Motherfucking G's, in 1993. The track was a scathing rebuttal to Dre's accusations, with Eazy calling out Dre for leaving Ruthless and questioning his street credibility. The feud between Eazy and Dre became one of the most infamous beefs in hip-hop, and it only added to the drama that was unfolding in the West Coast rap scene. But while the public focused on the beef, Eazy was still focused on building his empire. Despite the loss of Dre and Cube, Ruthless Records continued to thrive. Eazy had signed Bone Thugs-n-Harmony, a Cleveland-based rap group with a unique melodic style that blended rapid-fire rapping with harmonized vocals. Bone Thugs would go on to become one of the most successful acts of the 1990s, thanks in large part to Eazy's belief in their potential. In many ways, Eazy was ahead of his time. He wasn't just a rapper, he was an entrepreneur who understood the power of owning his own label and controlling his own destiny. While other artists were content to sign contracts and collect checks, Eazy was thinking long-term. He knew that in order to truly make it in the music industry, you had to own the means of production. That's why Ruthless Records was so important to him. It wasn't just a label, it was his legacy. But even as Eazy continued to expand his business, the tensions within the West Coast hip-hop scene were growing. The feud between Ruthless Records and Death Row wasn't just about music, it was about power. Suge Knight and Eazy-E were two of the most powerful men in hip-hop, and their rivalry was quickly becoming one of the most dangerous beefs in the industry. The stakes were high, and the lines between business and the streets were becoming increasingly blurred. As the drama played out in public, Eazy-E remained focused on his goals. He had already proven that he could succeed in the music industry, but now he was looking for new ways to expand his brand. He had dabbled in acting, made appearances in music videos, and was even exploring opportunities in film and television. But no matter how far he ventured outside of music, he always came back to Ruthless Records. For Eazy, it was more than just a business, it was his ticket to immortality. However, as the 1990s progressed, Eazy's life was about to take a sudden and tragic turn, one that no amount of business savvy could have prepared him for. Despite all the success and the empire he had built, Eazy was facing a battle that would ultimately define the final chapter of his life. By the mid-1990s, Eazy-E had firmly established himself as one of the most influential figures in hip-hop. Despite the departure of Ice Cube and Dr. Dre from N.W.A. and the relentless feuds that followed, Eazy's legacy was cemented by his contributions to the music world through Ruthless Records. He was no longer just a rapper, he was a business mogul, responsible for discovering and nurturing talent like Bone Thugs-n-Harmony, who would go on to become platinum-selling artists under his guidance. But behind the scenes, tensions and battles, both internal and external, were beginning to weigh heavily on Eazy. The feud between Eazy and Dr. Dre continued to dominate headlines as the West Coast rap scene exploded. Death Row Records, founded by Dre and Suge Knight, was rising fast, with the Chronic and Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style taking the world by storm. Eazy couldn't ignore the success that Dre was having, but he didn't let it slow him down. Ruthless Records was still going strong, and Eazy wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He fought back with his own music and business moves, continuing to sign new artists and push the boundaries of what Ruthless Records could achieve. However, the beef between Eazy-E and Dre wasn't just about music, it was personal. The diss tracks flying back and forth fueled the rivalry, with Dre's F with Dre Day and Eazy's Real Motherfucking G's becoming anthems for the conflict. In many ways, the feud represented a larger battle within the hip-hop community, a clash between old-school hustlers like Eazy, who had built their success from the streets, and the new wave of artists who were more focused on the glamour and fame that came with the mainstream success. As the tension escalated, Eazy began to shift his focus. He had already proven himself in the music industry, and now he was thinking about the future. He had dreams of expanding Ruthless Records beyond just hip-hop. Eazy was always an entrepreneur at heart, and he had his eyes on other ventures, from film and television to fashion. He wanted Ruthless Records to be more than just a label, it was his legacy, and he wanted to ensure that it would continue to thrive long after he was gone. But in early 1995, Eazy's world took a devastating turn. After months of feeling ill, Eazy-E checked himself into Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. What began as a lingering cough soon turned into something far more serious. On March 16, 1995, Eazy publicly announced that he had been diagnosed with AIDS. The news shocked the world. In the early 90s, AIDS was still a highly stigmatized and misunderstood disease, particularly within the Black community. Eazy's diagnosis brought the disease into the spotlight in a way that few other public figures had done. For Eazy-E, the diagnosis was a harsh reminder of his mortality. In a matter of days, the man who had once seemed invincible, who had built an empire from nothing, was facing the reality that his time was running out. But in true Eazy-E fashion, he wasn't going to go out quietly. Even in his final days, Eazy made it clear that he wanted his legacy to be about more than just his music. In a public statement released shortly after his diagnosis, Eazy urged his fans and the public to learn from his mistakes, especially when it came to safe sex and awareness of the disease. Despite the shock of his diagnosis, Eazy-E remained focused on his legacy. He worked tirelessly to ensure that Ruthless Records would continue after his death, making arrangements to secure the future of the label and the artists he had nurtured. He also made peace with some of his former rivals. In the final days of his life, Eazy reconciled with Dr. Dre, bringing an end to the years of animosity between them. It was a bittersweet moment, as both men realized how much they had accomplished together and how much they had allowed their egos to tear them apart. On March 26, 1995, just over a week after announcing his diagnosis, Eazy-E passed away. He was only 31 years old. His death sent shockwaves through the music industry and left a void in the world of hip-hop. Eazy-E had been a pioneer, a visionary who had changed the landscape of the genre forever. His influence on West Coast rap and hip-hop in general was undeniable. He had taken the raw energy of the streets and turned it into a global phenomenon, inspiring countless artists to follow in his footsteps. Even after his death, Eazy-E's legacy lived on. Ruthless Records continued to operate, and Bone Thugs-N-Harmony, one of Eazy's most successful discoveries, went on to become one of the biggest groups of the 1990s. Their tribute to Eazy, The Crossroads, became a massive hit, serving as a poignant reminder of the impact Eazy had on their careers and on the world of hip-hop. The song's success helped cement Eazy's legacy as a mentor and pioneer who had shaped the careers of some of the most influential artists of the decade. Eazy's death also brought renewed attention to the AIDS epidemic, particularly within the Black community. His public battle with the disease helped to break down some of the stigma surrounding it and opened up a conversation about safe sex and awareness in a way that few other public figures had done at the time. Though his life was tragically cut short, Eazy-E's impact extended far beyond just the music he created. For many, Eazy-E will always be remembered as the godfather of gangsta rap, the man who put Compton on the map and helped pave the way for an entire generation of artists. His contributions to hip-hop, both as an artist and a businessman, remain a cornerstone of the genre's history. But beyond the music, Eazy's legacy is one of resilience, determination, and an unrelenting drive to succeed against all odds. He may be gone, but his influence will never be forgotten. Even after his passing in 1995, Eazy-E's influence on hip-hop culture has remained strong. Though his life was tragically short, the legacy he built during his time in the industry continues to shape the genre and the business of hip-hop today. Eazy wasn't just a pioneer in gangsta rap, he was one of the first artists to fully understand the importance of owning the means of production in the music industry. Ruthless Records was a blueprint for how independent labels could rise to power in a world dominated by major corporations, and Eazy was one of the first to show that an artist could be a mogul in their own right. Ruthless Records, the label that Eazy-E founded, continued to thrive in the years following his death. Bone Thugs-N-Harmony, one of the most successful acts signed by Eazy, became an iconic group in the 1990s, with their unique blend of melodic rap and rapid-fire delivery setting them apart from other artists. Their 1995 single, The Crossroads, a heartfelt tribute to Eazy-E, became a massive hit and won a Grammy Award. The song's success was a testament to Eazy's ability to spot talent and nurture artists who could innovate and push the boundaries of hip-hop. Eazy-E's vision for Ruthless Records was more than just about signing artists, it was about creating a platform for voices that weren't being heard in mainstream music. He took chances on artists who had something different to offer, whether it was their style, sound, or message. His approach to business, while often misunderstood or criticized, was revolutionary for its time. Eazy knew that in order to truly succeed in the music industry, you had to control not just the art, but the business behind it. His legacy as a mogul has influenced countless artists who followed in his footsteps, from Jay-Z to Master P to Dr. Dre himself. But Eazy-E's legacy wasn't just about the business. He was a trailblazer in the genre of gangsta rap, helping to usher in a new era of hip-hop that was unapologetic in its depiction of the realities of street life. Before N.W.A., few artists had dared to tackle the subjects that Eazy and his group rapped about. Songs like F That Police didn't just spark controversy, they sparked a national conversation about police brutality, racism, and the systemic issues facing Black communities in America. Eazy-E's music was a reflection of his environment, and through his lyrics, he gave a voice to people who had long been ignored. The influence of Eazy-E's work can be seen in the artists who have come after him. His impact on the West Coast hip-hop scene is undeniable, but his reach extended far beyond California. Eazy's fearless approach to both music and business inspired generations of rappers to stay true to their roots and to take control of their careers. Artists like Kendrick Lamar, who grew up in Compton, have credited Eazy and N.W.A. as foundational influences, showing that Eazy's work continues to resonate with the new generation of artists who are using hip-hop as a platform for social commentary. Even beyond music, Eazy-E's legacy is felt in the cultural shift he helped create. He was one of the first rappers to become a mainstream celebrity while still holding on to his street credibility. Eazy-E showed the world that you could come from the streets and still become a successful entrepreneur, a role model for young people who saw in him a pathway out of poverty and into success. His image, the sunglasses, the Jerry curl, the Raiders cap became iconic, a symbol of rebellion and self-determination. Even today, more than 2 decades after his death, Eazy's image and persona remain instantly recognizable, a testament to his lasting influence. Eazy-E's contributions to hip-hop culture were also immortalized in the 2015 biopic Straight Outta Compton, which told the story of N.W.A.'s rise to fame and the impact they had on the music industry and society. The film, produced by Dr. Dre and Ice Cube, was a critical and commercial success, grossing over $200 million worldwide and earning praise for its depiction of Eazy's life and career. For many younger fans, the movie was their first introduction to Eazy-E and N.W.A., further solidifying his place in the pantheon of hip-hop legends. While Eazy-E's influence is undeniable, his death from AIDS in 1995 also brought attention to the importance of health awareness, particularly within the hip-hop community. Eazy's public battle with the disease helped destigmatize conversations around AIDS, which at the time was still largely misunderstood and often associated with shame and discrimination. His willingness to speak openly about his diagnosis, even in the face of death, was a brave act that helped break down barriers and encourage conversations about safe sex and health awareness in the Black community. In the end, Eazy's legacy is one of innovation, resilience, and fearlessness. He wasn't just a rapper, he was a visionary who saw potential where others saw only limitations. He built Ruthless Records from the ground up, helped give birth to one of the most influential movements in hip-hop history, and used his platform to speak truth to power. Eazy's life was a testament to the power of self-determination, and his influence can still be felt in the music, culture, and business of hip-hop today. Though his time on this earth was brief, Eazy-E left an indelible mark on the world. He gave a voice to the streets of Compton, created opportunities for countless artists, and inspired a generation of rappers to take control of their careers. More than 25 years after his death, Eazy-E's legacy lives on in the music he created, the artists he inspired, and the cultural shift he helped bring about. His story is a reminder that true influence isn't measured by longevity, but by the lasting impact you leave behind. For Eazy-E, that impact is undeniable.